all the story about this building, I was thinking personally, okay, you will be the guy who will be who will be set in old history of architecture books that the guy who demolished the original building, you know, there was the Wertheim who built it and the Mackow who demolished, you know. When Wertheim's family decided to go for this building, they announced the closed but international architectural competition for choosing the project. As it's revealed later on, the Dernburg was a very close friend of the owner of the Wertheim. They were studied together. They were close friends. So probably the competition was not so not so clear as it should be. What was very interesting, after the few months he was working on the competition entry and prepared a post-competition concept, which was completely on a completely different level of architecture.
Wrocław was such a hotbed of modernism before the war and of progressive architecture, and this was a very progressive building. Wertheim was very keen on using new technologies like escalator. The first escalator in Wrocław was installed in Renoma, in Wertheim. Lifts, air conditioning, and other you know, types of equipment that are absolutely cutting edge then, but are now taken for granted.
All stories connected with these Wertheim buildings were showing that the building was really the best. It was the biggest department store open on the east side of Berlin.
We interested both in the commerce in our town, so we started from the commerce in Germany. And then we work on this building. 20 years ago we started just to make some small projects.
Everybody could see that the architecture of this building is great, because before that everything was in grey color or brown color and without any accents, and it looks very bad.
Reminds us how progressive the Wertheim building was when it was built in the 30s. It was very progressive in terms of organization of retail.
It was the department store who was dedicated mostly to the goods which are coming from all different parts of the world. From the beginning, Wertheim's thought how to show that to the public. They had an idea together with Dernburg and the two collaborating sculptors to put some heads onto the facades dedicated to all exotic nations. When we met the son of Mr. Klakow, one of the sculptors, he remembered that very precisely. His father was subscribing something like today's National Geographic.
It was printed from 1929, just 1 year before opening the building. And I know that both the artists, they bought it.
In this paper was lots of photos of the exotic, you know, faces.
As you can see, it was from 1929, the Atlantis, and this is the hat on the elevation. So surely he used it just as a model for these different types of the people.
Sending to the public the message that because on the facade there are exotic, you know, faces and heads, inside you can find goods from all over the world.
Georg Wertheim was also a special man because he finished courses at the Academy of Art in Berlin because he had his own opinion about the architecture and he wanted to have something special and really contemporary.
Because it was a very great man. He was a socialist. He helps his personnel in department. So to the last moment, yes, his staff to as long as it was possible, he protects them from the Nazis. The day it was opened, it was in April 1930. Yes, yes. It was the time of very big crisis. Next crisis was connected with Nazis, which this building belongs to German Jewish, and Nazis decided to destroy this firma, of course, to nationals. He was alone, without money, without family, because most of the family emigrate to USA, and people who stay in Germany were taken to the prisons, to the concentration camps. Yes, he died in a small room as a poor man.
I remember exactly, it was June 1998, so 11 years ago exactly. And some new client investor bought a Renoma, and he's looking for guys who will make the inventory of the building, the survey. We said to ourselves, okay, that's a great job. And it was a very great adventure to measure all those different shops inside, you know, to measure all the building, to know its texture, its structure. And this client said, okay, so if you manage to do this, let's collaborate. Around between 2002 and 2003, when the client, in my opinion, let's say, took the decision to, let's say, stop it and to make a great move, like extension, and completely change the philosophy of the building from the typical department store into the city mall. To be honest, in our opinion, extension was completely, how to say, strange, even crazy idea. There was one day I remember spent on the drawings, discussion with Krystyna Paweł-Kirschke, and they said to me, listen, but you know, there were the plans of extension. And we were start to looking, and we finally found that one drawing of Dernburg, which was showing that extension. And then was really the day I thought, okay, even the original author was thinking about it.
Mackow and architect and his team was a bunch of very young architects, really. So AFE was invited to have a look on some details and general concept. And we assist Mackow in reviewing the idea and assisting a bit in tender stage, just to be sure that the idea is properly implemented on site.
This original building is very powerful and very characteristic, and within this new wing we have lots of things because we have the retail on the first 3 levels, but then we have a car park. Somewhere inside we have the restaurants, and somewhere inside we have the new entry. So we have to create the new envelope, new skirt, having all those different functions. We create something very strong element, which will be horizontal, because all the history connected with the facades are horizontal. And this element will be the louvre, one louvre, or the wing, as we call it.
The few ideas about the horizontal louvres, architects insist of having something which is perfect in terms of alignment with the horizontal partitions of all the buildings. It was the main issue, and some curvature of the facade was the issue. So we spent a bit of time trying to solve this properly.
We first go to the Arup and ask them if it's possible to have a very, very big wing, something like 1 meter 20, 1 meter 50, projecting and overhanging the building. What about the wind? What about the snow? What about the pigeons? What about all those stuff? After these exercises with Arups, we found that that was a rather stupid idea to have it very heavy, and we decided to completely change the strategy to make those wings made of aluminium and the new material, which is alu-core. We were asked by the client, listen, okay, that looks very beautiful. We've got everything was necessary. We've got the building permit, there was a tender. But the client realized, but we will have, something like 1,000 pigeons sitting on those louvers and, making one big problem around. And we asked, I remember that we typed the email to the Arup. What about the pigeons issues? Could we solve it? And after something like a few days, the coming email from Wrocław and saying, listen, we've got something like 2,000 documents about the pigeons internally, so we will prepare you the report. And after another week, they sent us a report saying that that our louver that we together designed has a certain slope that the pigeons doesn't like.
It's a mystery, really, and we've got plenty of specialized articles and investigations on pigeon behavior to investigate if this slope is exactly what they like or not, if the depth of the external features is enough to nesting or not, and the conclusion is really the pigeons are unpredictable completely. And they are like some places and they don't like some places. And fortunately, I think, because I have a look on this particular issue on my recent visit on Renoma, and I didn't spot any pigeons, so hopefully it's not the issue. I think the most important issue was a relationship between new and old buildings, really. And we know the old building was very noble, and to create something adequate, very close, nearby, it was the challenge, really.
The sculpture by Monika Sosnowska that was commissioned by the developer of Renoma, that is now exhibited outside the department store, has a very interesting story. It is a steel structure, a blue steel structure, that is supposed to remind us the days of the early 90s, when streets in Poland were awash with temporary stalls and little with street merchants selling out of temporary kiosks. And this structure is a reminder how far we went within the last 20 years in terms of the standard of living and the way we shop. The steel structure also reminds me of a temporary structure that appeared in the Wertheim department store in 1945, right after the war, when the building was burned down.
Between 1930 and now, it's an incredible troubled time for Wrocław. And the Second World War must be mentioned, because Wrocław was completely demolished, heavily bombed at the end of the war. And what is even more dramatic, the whole population of the Wrocław, which was German, was moved somewhere. And the new society, new population was created, and it's amazing, challenging and troubled time.
Most of the new citizens of Wrocław came from Eastern Poland, which is very different culturally, not just from the main core of Poland, but also from Germany. The first 4 or 5 years after the war were a transitional period. The city was not really being reconstructed. Actually, it was not settled until 1970, when an agreement was signed between the new Polish state and the West German state that made the new Polish-German border permanent, and people started to gain certainty about the status of the city, and it started to make sense to invest more money here.
My name is Andrzej Kamler, born here in Wrocław in 1952. I left Wrocław in 1980, just before Solidarity movement started in Poland, and came back in 97. That was more than 70 years, a little bit. The circumstances which forced me really to leave Poland was the lack of development. There was no future for young people. The city started to develop very rapidly, especially the last, I'd say, 5 to 6 years is a great development for Wrocław. There is a vision in Wrocław. One can see it comparing with other big Polish cities. Lots of new buildings, lots of renovations going on around, lots of young students, lots of high schools, private high schools being established in Wrocław. Lots of interesting cultural and leisure activities in Wrocław. The parks gain their beautiful sights again. The streets in the center are inviting people to stay there during late evening hours. This is completely different city, and what is for me difficult to say for other cities, if one comes to Wrocław every half a year, one can see the difference. Normally you've got two options, people are for or against. And here everybody was proud of that this building, which is very old and unique, in fact, was restored to this function which is doing today.
There are many interesting aspects of the Renoma project that make it more than another shopping center, because it is technically now a shopping center. It's one of many signs that Wrocław is coming to terms with its German past.
It fit perfectly, really, because this communication between old building and new building is really related. It's something similar to the history of the Wrocław itself, really. And if you look at the surroundings, there is a plenty of the old market and all these buildings around. It's really replicate the same history.
You can see constant and rapid change in Wrocław. Obviously, there is plenty to do, and it will take ages and tens of years to bring Wrocław to its former glory as it was before the Second World War.
Poland is a very good place to live right now. I think it's the best time in our history in many aspects. People are wealthier than ever, happier than ever, and it shows in all sorts of surveys. Perhaps we are not courageous enough, that we are not seizing the opportunity to the maximum. We are getting richer, we are getting happier, healthier. Perhaps it should be better manifested through architecture, for instance. It should be more daring.